So, Larry, welcome to the Hellbound interviews. How are you doing?
My absolute pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
I revisited Funhouse last night, and it'd been about I'd say about 5 years since I'd seen it.
Really.
Um, yeah, and it honestly really does stand up. Like really stands up. And the first thing I'll say is, I was watching it because we've just had our TV fixed. We were about to send our OLED TV up. We bought a new TV, really nice one. I thought, right, we're going to watch it on that. But it's basically failed yesterday. That's had to be sent away. And I watched it in the kitchen, and there's these big windows next to me. So it's a really kind of spooky area to watch it, which is great for me. And the titles, opening titles are terrifying. It kind of, there's a lot of, I think I messaged you yesterday, or I wrote this down. It reminds me a lot of Westworld, not just because of the robots, but tonally, there's something kind of very creepy about the park or the carnival that's kind of unspoken. And I really, really enjoyed it.
I, 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 I will tell you one thing about the titles that nobody really knows, and I'm
Okay.
sure they exist someplace. But originally, when they always were going to do the marionette puppets, and they were trying to get them to match up, like the producer looked like a producer, and the writer obviously had
Yeah.
a pen and quill in hand. But when the titles popped on in red, they originally had blood dripping from the red
Yeah.
down, and they made a decision to take it out. To this day, I don't understand because it was so cool. I was so excited when I saw that.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame sometimes. And I think it really did work though. And like, I'm just going to refer. I'm not going to look down too often in my notes, but I've got
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
one of the best compliments I can give you in Tobe Hooper, the director, is that the kids or the high school kids aren't annoying. For me, when they're in that car together, they could have quite easily been just started to annoy the hell out of me, because we've all seen it in films where they're just really dumb kids. But they're getting on, and they feel like a real group of friends. I know there's something I've skipped in terms of the little mask being put on, looking around the room, but the kids aren't annoying. That's exactly what I found straight away.
That dialogue is all my dialogue,
Yeah,
and I wanted them to come across again. Remember, you have to put this in perspective in terms of the year it was written in.
yeah,
This was basically my recollections of what I was like at that age, or a little bit older, like freshman year in college. And yeah, they had different personalities. They represented different things, and I always, put myself in their shoes. But I will tell you something I like to say a lot, which is that once actors are signed on and they begin working together, they own the part. The actors know more about their own characters than the director and even the writer, because they really own the part. And when they're having trouble owning it, they usually ask questions, and later on we can talk about that. But so I got a couple of phone calls during the shoot where they were asking, like, well, what, like Richie wanted to know, why am I stealing that money? Why am I doing that? And so Toby gets on the phone with me and says, I need you to talk to Richie and explain to him why. And I give him an explanation, which is why, because you're sort of, a little bit jealous of Buzz, and he's the big shot of the group, and he's the macho guy of the group, and you're doing this basically to show off and to up yourself in terms of that group. So that's the reason why you're doing it, and you're going to split it. You're going to come across as being a hero, which I mean, I would never do it, but I can certainly relate. I can certainly relate to people doing something like that, and
yeah.
but they owned it. They were great. They played really well together. So.
So behind the scenes, was the kind of camaraderie? Because you hear about stories of younger actors, having a nice bond on set if things are going well. Was that? Would you say that's a fair point?
I was only on set. I was on set for pre-production. I was there like for 10 days of pre-production, and then they wanted to get me off the set. Why? Because we had an issue on the film. Tobe understood the movie, obviously, because I worked with him after he got interested in the script. And, but one of the producers in particular basically didn't like the script, didn't like the movie. And that is a disaster. Yeah. So I felt really bad that after, I spent 10 days with Tobe. I was with Mort Rabinowitz, the set designer who had done Warriors, believe it or not. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. No, Mort Rabinowitz was the set designer who did They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And Castle Keep, which were all basically one big set movies, if you know, and then Andrew Laszlo, who had done Warriors, and a whole bunch of other things, was the DP. And
I love one of the first things. I know obviously there's a lot of first things, but I'm a huge fan of Anamorphic, and it was, for a start, it's very efficient, and it feels very lean. There isn't like a shot that's kind of out of kilter with the rest of the film. Like when the little kid's waiting for his sister, and there's a big crane move where he's just about to leave. It all makes so much sense. And I've got to say, right, I don't need to look at that. The sense of reality with that park, or that let's call it carnival, with that carnival, you rarely see that. You feel it's so fake, and the amount of people, the way it's shot, it felt like something you would go and visit.
Well, let me tell you, quick background. When I was 16 or 17 years old back east, this is, we're in the USA right now. So when I was back east in New York, I used to go to summer camp, and we once went to a county fair, and that county fair was basically exactly what this was. Yeah. And it freaked me out as a kid, as a teenager. I couldn't believe it. They had there were the smells and the sights and the sounds, and they had girly shows, and lots of forbidden things where you had to be 18 to be able to do these things. And it made such an incredible impression on me that I always knew that one day this is going to make a great setting. But so I wrote it. When I wrote the script, I put all the elements that I remembered that they had at that fair. And then, of course, I did a lot of research. I research everything, I always do, about what county fairs have, and what they're notorious for, and about carny life and all this. But what they did was, when they made a decision to do this to shoot this in Florida, Florida is the home base for carnivals when they're on hiatus. So they actually hired a real carnival with real carnies working the equipment. So that was all real. As a matter of fact, it was so real that they ran short on funds, and they decided when they were shooting the scenes that they're going to open it up to the public. They're going to charge admission. You're going to be in a movie, and they're going to take the money from the admission and put it into the production.
That's incredible.
What you're seeing is a totally legitimate carnival.
I've never heard of that before.
The only thing that's totally different about it is the Funhouse, which was designed very carefully by Mort Rabinowitz, who was a genius. And again, I spent a lot of time with Mort and with the DP. They were asking me, like, what were you going for here? What did you want here? And they were like amazing.
That's awesome.
And
that's a great collaboration.
No, I was able to explain to them. And Tobe was totally in sync about this, because he gravitated toward this from the very beginning. Later on, if you want, I need to set the record straight about how the project actually came about, because
Yeah,
there's
that was
lots of falsities about it. But we knew exactly what we wanted to do. We knew that this was basically, this was like a kind of like fun kind of an environment that was dreamy, and slowly but surely in increments was going to get darker and darker and more surrealistic until you get to the ending where Amy is hysterical and she's hallucinating. And there were scenes in there that were never shot of her. You know, there's one in particular where she's being chased. There was like a 8-minute chase she was supposed to have in that movie that was never shot. And that chase was after Buzz was killed, where she's literally being stalked by the monster. And the monster, believe it or not, when his father dies, the Barker dies, imprints on Amy. And he wants her. I mean, there was the same way he was seeking affection from Liz that went wrong when she panics and kills him. So he wanted her. There was a foreshadowing for her being, you know, the bride of Frankenstein in the very beginning of the movie.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So there were so many layers and metaphors. I have a literary background. I got a master's degree in literature at the University of New Hampshire. So I really had studied, you know, literature and great, you know, and storytelling in the classics, and, you know, Gothic, you know, horror. And so I had really layered it and textured it, because I knew it was a relatively simple story, but it was imperative for me that everybody understood that we're going to, number one, treat the audience to an environment that they haven't seen before from the inside. They're going to experience it the way the kids are experiencing it, and it's going to evolve from fun and games that are fake and obviously simulated this and simulated that, to, you know, to a magician who's doing a show where you think it's real.
I love that scene.
There's a lot to tell about that, because Bill Finley was incredible. I was with Tobe when we hired Bill Finley, and Tobe calls up Bill because he had worked with him on you know, the what do you call it, Eaten Alive.
Yeah,
I think he was in a, you know, yeah. And so Finley said, I'm in the room with Tobe, and Tobe says, well, let me call Bill Finley. We'll try to get Bill Finley. And he calls, hey, Bill, it's Tobe. How you doing? Listen, I got this movie I'm doing. We're starting very soon. So he said, Bill, I'm listening in. I'm hearing the conversation. Bill says, it's not another one of those like typical, like one of your typical movies, is it? Because he had just done, you know, I guess it was Eaten Alive. And Tobe said, no, it's really different. We've got, like, you know, Mort Rabinowitz, and we have like Andrew Laszlo, who did The Warriors, and we got a great script. So Bill says, well, could you read me some of my lines? And Tobe picks up the script and begins reading that monologue that I had written, you know, for Bill Finley about, you know, the explanation for Vlad the Impaler, and that's the you know, the background for the Dracula myth, which means it's really based on reality. And I was telling the audience that, you know, that these things actually can be real and they have a foundation in real life. So he reads him his scenes, and Bill says, okay, I love it, I'll do it, and he signed on. But the point that I was making is that Tobe understood the movie so well, because I basically, you know, when I first met him and he asked me what I was working on, I told him a project called the Funhouse, and he goes, I'd love to see, you almost done with it? I said, I got another couple of weeks of work. And he said, well, I'd love to see it when you're done. So Tobe got it 100%. Mark Lester, who was one of the executive producers, who was really not involved in the production. He had gotten the money, he had put up the money. Derek Power liked horror. He had done Peter Weir's The Last Wave. I don't know if you know that.
I know the director, but I don't know that film though.
Okay, well, he was, you know, but this was the producer. This was Derek Power who had produced this.
Right.
But one of the other producers basically from the beginning said, I don't get this. I don't like this. And I can't even believe it, because when I after pre-production, I basically left Tobe without like having a wingman, somebody who could basically, you know, bolster and take care of business in terms of understanding what was going on. Now, again, the DP and the set designer and the costume people and, you know, everybody else who was on the set, they all got it. But I just felt really bad that I couldn't. And anyway, where were we? They okay. You were talking about the titles and the
and the actors that, well, it wasn't the actors. It's your script and the direction. The kids weren't annoying, and that's it's such a welcome relief because instantly, because we've all seen like 1,000 films, but when we watch these kids go, right, these are going to be annoying. You know, you have this subconscious kind of thought about it, and they weren't just completely normal, getting on with lives. They wasn't really over the top goofy or anything like that.
They got along really well, and I know that because when the movie opened in Hollywood and I was on Hollywood Boulevard, I actually bumped into it. You know, it was at the Egyptian Theater or something. I actually bumped into to Cooper Huckabee and Elizabeth Berridge, and they were together. They were holding hands. They were so excited about the opening of the movie, which was so sweet. And I remember them. You know, one of them getting into I guess they had payphones or something. He said, "Oh, they're you know, I just heard from a friend in Atlanta, and they're like screaming. They're going crazy for this movie in Atlanta. This is when it opened worldwide."
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a chemistry, and but I wrote them jokes that joke with the duck that hopping up on the hot plate. And Buzz being awkward and making sure that she got the joke, you know, and she said, "I got the joke." Meanwhile, they had all smoked dope before they went in, and that was like funny and different. And you know, there was that line with you know, I don't think they're hitting, you know, I don't think they're getting along so well. And then Richie says, "Of course they're getting along." And then Liz says, "Yeah, well, when you're stoned, everybody, you know, including Charlie Manson, is a great guy."
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote the quips and the little back and forth. They did some ad-libbing, but you know, they were great. They were really great.
I loved. Sorry, go ahead.
By the way, you can look this up. Cooper Huckabee is very proud of the fact that he got the job in Django Unchained, you know, with the Quentin Tarantino movie.
Who is he in that?
He plays one of the, he's much old, obviously he's much older. He plays one of the bad guys who gets killed.
Oh, wow. Check that out, yeah.
But he's very proud of the fact that Tarantino said, "Well, I wanted to see you because I loved Funhouse." And you were so good. You were so good in Funhouse.
That's awesome.
You know, I love when I hear things like this. But he was great. He was great. He you know, a lot of people argue that the guy's a real a-hole, but he's a real hero. I
think so. Yeah.
He's a hero at the end of that movie. I mean, and then I had that scene where where I thought it was, well, right. The problem with writers is they think all their stuff is great when it's delivered properly, but when she says, "Buzz, how come you never asked me out before?" Okay, this is like 1/3 into the movie, and he says, "I don't know. I was afraid you wouldn't go out with me," and she says, "Well, I would have." And it's such a sweet moment, and they did it.
It's
so
really
nicely.
Nice. It's so through your writing, and it felt right in terms of the pacing as well. I think that those little sweet moments, those little kind of personal moments between when the group got split up, like, "Oh, I hope they're okay," and all of that. It works so well. And like the kid on his own, it's her brother, isn't it? The one that have the argument at the very beginning, which is a great opening, by the way. And I felt like alone with him. Do you know what I mean? Like I was in his shoes walking along the street, and that guy is jokingly firing the shotgun at him. And yeah, I think it worked. I honestly, I think it's a really solid film, and it hasn't dated badly at all.
No, I don't think so, because it's like nowhere. Another movie like that, which is one of my favorite movies, we can talk about later if you want to,
Yeah, sure.
is It Follows. I absolutely felt, and
Yeah,
that also, that's nowhere. It doesn't even, logically it doesn't make sense where it is, because it's like disjointed. They have regular televisions, tube television sets in there, and then they have funky, the girl's reading off a seashell, little mini
that's
reader.
that's what that's what gave it the Westworld vibe for me. When I was watching that, it wasn't just that it was self-contained in the carny. It was the fact that what you said about the production, it was a real carnival group, and it all works so well. And that's why when they go into the funhouse, it starts to turn so kind of, because you're like part of the atmosphere of going in, having a candy floss or whatever, and going to that peep show, like carving the hole in the peep show. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah,
And when people see that, if they haven't seen it, it's hilarious. But yeah, it's the setup. It's a fantastic setup, and then it's like obviously turns really dark, and it's quite a heartfelt story for how would you describe it? The son, the monster, so to speak. It reminded me in elements of Frankenstein as well, and I love the little nods to Wolfman and Frankenstein at the very beginning of the film which is a really nice. It flips on its head. If you haven't seen it before, it flips on its head what you think is going to happen. In the house, looking at all the things in the puppets and
right.
all of that. It's a really nice flip. And then it's like obviously the kind of nod to Psycho in the shower, and then it kind of reveals what happens. And
There's literally, if you look carefully, when you get the POV shot of it turns out to be Joey, but going
yeah,
through the room, we don't know who it is. Where he goes over to a clock, which has it's like a ventriloquist dummy face on it.
that's right. Oh, that's creepy. Really
And
creepy.
it winks.
Yeah.
And you were telling the audience what you're seeing right now is a wink. Because just hang in there, okay? We're not ripping off Halloween, and we're not ripping off Psycho. We're doing a homage, and like this is it's literally a wink.
Exactly. And I think the use of there's the mirror to the head of that dummy. It's like there's no obvious use of a mirror, but there's it just doubles what's in the room, and it is really a creepy opening, but it's great. It's a really great setup.
By the way, the opening was entirely reshot. I hate to disappoint you. The footage was lost in Miami.
What was it a different opening?
No, it was the exact same opening, but the footage was lost. Tobe had moved on to another show, and they had someone else who I'm trying to reconstruct who it actually was. And I haven't been able to do it, but I just haven't been able to. I don't know if I would reveal it if I was able to figure out who did it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But somebody else reshot that opening, and that was done on a closed set at Universal Studios because they lost the footage. There were problems with the Teamsters Union. That's written about, but it's out there in the ether. But the fact that somebody else shot that opening sequence really isn't.
Were you happy? Because I want to break this down a little bit. Were you happy how the opening came out? Turned
absolutely. The opening came out beyond my expectations. It looks and feels what it's supposed to look and feel like. I think that it's
really well shot. The whole film is really well shot.
It's an absolutely gorgeous film. The one thing that people criticize the film for is that it takes too long to get the action going, and
I don't agree with that.
I thought it was absolutely imperative that the audience experience what it was like to be in this kind of an environment, so that when the mask comes off and you see that there's a real monster under that mask, a real monster. I mean, I had it was like a troll. Only recently do I realize how much it actually looks like the Morlocks in Time Machine.
Yeah, the original, yeah.
I just recently.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
but I will tell you, I wanted the audience to be able to believe, because I had taken them on this arc, and they switched one scene around, which I think hurt that. Which, in other words, they did
that's in the cut. What do they swap around?
They swapped around the scene where she makes a reference when they go to the freak show, which obviously the freak show is telling you that there are anomalies in this world. She makes a reference to the fact that it's just like what the magicians do. She hadn't seen the magician yet, so the magician was supposed to come first.
Yeah,
and you were supposed to, as an audience, think, oh, this is all fun and games, and oh my gosh, this is terrible. They just killed this girl. It was an accident. No, it's a trick. You know, Marco pulled the trick on them, and it's a trick. And then when you go to the next scene, it's supposed to be the freak show, and that's why Liz is making a mention, saying it's just like what the magicians do, saying it's not real. But we know that it is real. But there are anomalies like this, and we've seen freaks in bottles before.
Yeah.
So that was the arc that I was doing, and for some reason they decided to switch it around another way. I'm sure it was. I'm sure they had a good reason for it, because Verna Fields, who was who became a VP at Universal Studios,
really, wow.
But she had, she was the editor on Jaws, and a whole bunch of other stuff. She came in and did a consult on it. And that's what they came up with. But I just felt that delay it as long as you need to delay it for the audience to believe that it's real, because by the time Madame Zena comes on, and she's like a phony psychic, but then she gets her real vision, and her real vision is these kids are all going to die, which is why the ad lib was get out of here. But her ad lib rather was, I'll break every fucking bone in your body, and that was great. She was amazing.
That was great. That was really great. She wasn't a cliche because it was all real. Do you know what I mean? So when that crystal ball rolled backwards, I'm like, that's she's real.
That was a real moment, and a lot of the other
I like how there wasn't a close up of one of the kids reacting to that, making it obvious. Do you know what I mean? It's like really subtly done. I thought, oh, that's interesting. It kind of piqued, or when I watched it originally, it really kind of piqued my interest, that particular point. And for me now, as an older guy, just watching this again, the things that interested me, like all the character things in the build-up, like the vampire, and you think the girls died in the kind of coffin stand. I loved all that. I think the production design of that scene specifically, I absolutely love it to bits. And you're showing the progression and so many different facets of the carnival. I think it's wonderful. The one thing that I love, especially about this and films with carnivals, are those little dark, shadowy areas behind tents. I'm all into those little pockets of shadow, and I love seeing that in movies, especially.
You have a guy taking a leak behind the tent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that woman's always watching the I'll call her the old crone. She's always watching the two girls do this kind of rotating thing where they're talking, obviously to reveal a bit more of the background. And I spotted her, like she's watching them. She's out of focus. I love that. Love it.
She's the conscience. She's the one who says, somebody did a whole article on this. She's the conscience that says, God is watching you.
Yeah, in the
because it really, my whole thing about horror is, they're morality tales.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Which makes me crazy when they try to reinvent the wheel sometimes in modern Hollywood, and they get rid of that element of guilt and and breaking taboos. That's been part of horror from the very beginning. That goes back to the classics. It goes back to Shakespeare. It goes back to the 5 books of Moses. This whole idea of there being a morality and taboos. And many years ago, when I used to do 5 meetings a week, and I was like on a roll for a while, getting other projects. I remember going to one of the studios, and they wanted me to write a vampire picture for them. And I said, I love vampire pictures because because it deals with this taboo. It's a universal taboo about eating blood. People do not drink blood. And that's what gives it its power, because you're breaking the taboo. And I remember the guy sitting, a development executive sitting back and going, well, we want to do something different. What if it's not a taboo? What if they're right and we're wrong? And I basically said to him, I can't do this movie, because the whole energy. I mean, you look at a movie like Blade, they understand it. I love the original movie Blade, the first one.
Oh,
they
yeah.
understand this. This is about blood is a taboo. This is where it gets its power from. So anyway, the kids shouldn't be lying to their parents. The old woman who was by the way was a famous Yiddish theater actress who played that part. And by the way, there was another scene in the beginning with Joey. Let me tell you something very quickly about Joey. There was a period of time where Tobe, after he signed on, said, you know what, I'm having second thoughts. I don't think I'm going to do this, because he was involved. There was something else. It might have been. I don't remember which movie it was, because this was in between Poltergeist and Salem's Lot. Anyway, so there was a period of like 48 hours where Tobe is saying, I don't know if I'm going to do the film now. So they brought in Joe Dante. And I met with Joe, and I had a great, we became friends, and I had like 2 meetings with him. Now, I always had Joey in the movie, and I had Joey, the mother was always an alcoholic. And I had Joey, after he gets screamed at, go back to bed, or so I'm going to, that he's back upstairs, and he's doing something like what I would have done as a kid, which is he's got a flashlight and he's reading, under the covers, he's reading a book on Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
And the witch in Hansel and Gretel, it says it in the screenplay, and you can see this on the TV version of the movie, not the, it's a deleted scene. It's that old lady crone, is the witch is that old lady crone, which was also a foreshadowing. But Joe came up with the idea, why don't we have, I had a meeting with him, and why don't we have Joey run away from home and try to get to the carnival? And I will tell you, that was Joe's idea. And I loved it. And, I created all the scenes, for it with it, and then put him on the road, and then basically did what I thought would happen to a kid on the road in the Tobe Hooper movie, which is that some dysfunctional person will come by and say, kid, you want to ride? Which again is that taboo about, I have so many people who have contacted me on Instagram saying, I would never hitchhike again after I saw that movie. I have other people because of hitchhiking. I have other people who said, I would never lie to my parents, because they saw it, they saw it on VHS or something when they were kids. I would never lie to my parents about, going to a carnival like that.
Yeah.
But that was Joe Dante's idea to get the kid on the road.
Because that is a very scary idea. If you're that young trying to find it, obviously he knows where it is, but trying to get there on your own, it's kind of a complete nightmare,
In the original script, and when they first shot it in Miami, there's a scene where you can actually see there's a telescope in the kid's room, and it's over, the window is overlooking, and you can actually see the carnival lights this is in the script. And it's possible
that's not in the film, is it?
No, but in the TV version, which is the extra footage, they had done some kind of a plastic transparency in the window.
Oh yeah, I see.
That looked like carnival lights in the distance. But the opening shot in this movie was you're seeing I had a body being buried, which is not in the movie. If I make the sequel, I will put it was like a body being buried, a body being carried, which turns out to be a mannequin, but you don't know it. And when the camera pulls back, you're watching this from a telescope, and the telescope is in the room, and Joey, who's obsessed by the carnival, you can see on his wall is the carnival is coming to town. And he's the one who begs his sister, bring me home a shrunken head, bring me home a shrunken head, which is not in the movie, except they shot the footage. This is what I call, I know this is, you'll have to put this back in some kind of order, I guess. But the whole, I call it the mystery of the shrunken head. If you watch it on Blu-ray especially, you can see, or if you watch it projected, you can see in the whole climax of the movie with Amy, she's wearing a shrunken head on a string that's tied to her belt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely.
She actually promises her brother, I want a shrunken head, I want a shrunken head, I want a shrunken head, okay? The mother says, what the hell do you want a shrunken head for? And so Amy is saying, you're not getting anything because you did this. Just for that, I'm not taking you to the carnival. And this is in the script. So she actually breaks down because she's a nice kid. And you actually see her, and there are photos. If you go online, you can see there's photos. I do a post of it actually, where you see where she's at a concession. She points to this is the shrunken head that she wants, and she picks it up, and Buzz takes it. This is in the script. They never shot it, and he takes it and he loops it around her belt and says, "Now you look like a headhunter," right? And so for the whole end of the movie, when they're stuck in the funhouse, she's wearing that little shrunken head, which is around, like like bigger than a golf ball, and it's on her belt. And in the script, at the end of the movie, when they have the final confrontation, the monster swats her. She goes flying backwards. The shrunken head detaches from her belt, rolls across the floor a few feet. The monster sees this, looks at it, picks it up, and he's staring at it, and that's when she whacks him over the head with the crowbar. So ironically, it was supposed to mean that by her softening up and deciding to buy a gift for her stupid brother, okay, it actually winds up saving her life, because it gives her the moment to be able to whack the guy over the head. That was but you do see the shrunken head, but they just had her. They had the skeleton pop up, which distracts him. She whacks him over the head, and then he backs up, and then he winds up, going to the electrical grid that killed, the electrical box that electrocutes him, that allows him to get killed.
I think another great scene in that is when the girl falls through. Well, the whole setup of the creature is fantastic. Like walking around, you think it's just someone that's got something wrong, like he's drunk or something like that. But there's something kind of the voyeuristic thing of looking at that scene with the is it the psychic? Is it the same? Is it the same character? Isn't it? That's basically saying, "I want more money to do something with you."
Okay, that's the psychic. Yeah.
That scene, the voyeuristic nature of that is to watch someone who's deformed or physically deformed like that character, because you don't necessarily something's very wrong with this character. For someone else to be watching that, I was feeling really effing sorry for that character.
You're supposed to. There's a
yeah.
Richie, when they go to the peep tent, you see the monster walking away from the peep tent.
Yeah.
And I think it's Buzz who actually articulates and says, I guess even Frankenstein has to get his jollies off. so
that's a great.
So there's actually a reference. I was the dreamscape in this movie was so carefully choreographed. There was no fluff in it. I really wanted the audience to, and then the audience is guilty of the voyeurism 2 times. They cut a hole in the back of the tent because they don't want to pay money to go in, and besides, you have to be 21 to go see that. Yeah. Which, by the way, sets up the fact that Buzz has got a switchblade. What's going on? Buzz is a tough guy. He's not. He just doesn't talk about it. He's a tough guy.
Yeah.
But the voyeurism, I don't know any good horror movie that doesn't have a really healthy dose of voyeurism, including the whole concept behind the horror movie.
Yeah.
You're watching a horror movie that's doing things that you're not going to do, that you would like to do, that you think about doing. What would happen in this situation? But it's an escape valve for our darkest fantasies and nightmares. So it's filled with voyeurism from the very beginning.
Yeah, but I didn't. The biggest compliment I can give yourself and Tobe, yourself mainly, is I didn't hate I believed in these characters. I didn't hate the teenagers. I know I keep going back to that, but throughout the film, I'm like, oh, like I love Christine, John Carpenter's Christine, but there's something about the main kid in it. Maybe it's the performance or something like that that's really irritating. But then it could, changes, develops, turns dark towards the end, and that's the point. But in this, I thought it was everyone pretty much stuck together in terms of like they liked each other and they reacted to things the same way. It was I thought it was great. And when they think the creature's coming towards them on the Funhouse train and they use the axe, I thought that was hilarious. That was absolutely hilarious, and it's actually their friend. Obviously, he's already dead, but
yes, he is. But people don't even remember that when reviewers talk about it. Yeah, that was one of the most insidious scenes that I wrote, and I'm very proud of it because.
Was there ever a point where, in that particular scene, that that character was still alive, and then they kill him?
No, no, they're not. People think that's the case, just like people make the assumption that the monster takes Liz and rams her head into the fan blades, which he doesn't do. He doesn't.
That's too obvious, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't do it. I'm thinking people are going to think he's doing it. I don't like those scenes. They don't look particularly good. And
for me, I think what is like I almost like the werewolf claws and the way he's like striking her. There's something.
Oh, you see the hand come up. You see the blood. There's
a film. What's the title of this film? There's a Kate Hudson, Casey Affleck, and Jessica Alba film. I can't remember the title of it. He's a sheriff. Casey Affleck.
Yeah. It's got
something me. It's one of the most brutal things I've ever seen in a film. The beating. You know exactly what I mean.
It's based on a famous novel, by the way.
And I think the beating of women in particular, especially on screen, there's something, you just can't get away from that. And I think it was too obvious for the fan. It was a great setup. The location was, they kind of set up for it. It was fantastic. And I loved how she saw him early on when he came around the corner in the pipes. And it wasn't like she saw him last second and then there's a scream.
No.
It was,
it's slow.
And she was getting very close to him. And, all the characters are relatively brave as well, I think. And it's great. They're not just screaming. Obviously, there's a lot of screams in it. And there's a lot of likability, I'd say, in the entire film with the characters. But that scene where they're watching him with paying the money, and he... What's really got the performance and in your writing is that obviously this is the point, but you feel so sorry for him. And when he's counting the money or not counting the money, and each time it's like, oh, he's really getting taken advantage of here. That's the darkest thing in the film, is the kind of manipulation of him. Do you know what I mean? Like getting pushed I need you to do this one last thing for us. I need to go and basically kill the kids.
Well, the father, this is what the history behind that was that Kevin Conway, who we were so fortunate to get, and I feel so bad that he passed away this year because he was a absolutely brilliant actor. He came up with the idea, who said, I'm only going to do this movie if I can play all three Barkers. Okay, and it's a great idea, and Toby went for it, and it was absolutely brilliant. But he also, this is when I was in pre-production, he's asking for, I would just like to have one more scene. I just, give me another scene between me and the kid. And I remember it because I was in a hotel room, and I used to, have to. They didn't do. There's a very funny limo story about this, but I was getting to the set, which was a little tiny studio that we did, Ivan Tour Studios, where they I think it's called Norin Studios, where they shot Flipper. But he says, I just need one another scene. So I again, this is very steeped in taboos and religion and lying. So I said, well, let's make it look like a confession booth. Let's make it be where the father is imploring the kid, like the kid. It looks like confession, where the monster is like ashamed of what's going on, and the father.
Isn't he standing in the corner of the room?
Yeah, but it looks like they even have some icons, in the background there. It's a corn thing or something, like a corn husk doll or something, where he says, "Just do this one more bad thing." One more bad thing, and then afterwards, this is like, I think it's my funniest line in the movie because he says it sincerely. He says, "And afterwards, I'll take you fishing or anything you want." The idea of
it's that kind of family bond of father and son, or whatever.
And you just picture them going fishing. It's like the trout's hanging out of the kid's mouth, but. Yeah. It's a highly dysfunctional family. The kid, which is Tobe Hooper stuff. But I have him, saying, and again, I'm so proud of a line where he says, "And I don't hate the sound. As God is my witness." I'm quoting Gone with the Wind, actually. "As God is my witness, I don't hate the sound of your voice." They make up, he makes up because he says, "I can't stand the sound of your filthy voice," and he smacks him earlier in the scene. So again, the whole key to this, and this is what, by the way, parenthetically, why I love Dan O'Bannon's Return of the Living Dead, and I go to a great length in terms of speaking about this.
That was great, by the way. We'll talk about that in just a sec. Yeah.
Okay. The key to good horror movies, and I think maybe what you liked about these characters, everybody believed in what they were saying and doing. There is no tongue-in-cheek. And when you see tongue-in-cheek in a horror movie, it kills the movie. And one of the tells you can get from is when people say after a movie is over, when the cast and the crew say, "We had such a good time making this movie," and they show you all these like really funny outtakes where everybody's like laughing and everything. To me, it's you just missed the whole point. Every character believes it is total integrity, and I think across the board, any good horror movie, no matter how outrageous the character is, he's an outrageous character, Marco the Magnificent. In this, Bill Finley believes that he's a showman and he's going to scare the shit out of the audience, and he delivers a stellar performance. Yeah. Every character needs to do this.
That's one of when I saw what was it I watched? It was a clip of him standing outside the Funhouse talking about coming in and enjoying it or reacting to it. If you watch that on its own, all the lines of dialogue of what he does, it's really sinister. It's really sinister, and he's like, "Yeah, come in," and like it's really dark. Obviously, you got the context of all this, the fun and the coconut shy or whatever it is.
Well, this is the Barker's relationship with Amy, which is very extraordinary. Yeah. Which when Dean Koontz did the novelization of it, he did backstories that didn't have them just metaphorically be linked. I have them metaphorically linked in the movie. Yep. The beginning of the movie, it's said the Bride of Frankenstein. So you know that Amy is going to wind up as that's going to be her future. Yep. When Madame Zena reads her palm, she says a tall, dark stranger is going to enter and change your life. Okay, what do you think she's talking about? She's talking about the monster at the end of the movie. So I'm trying to do it in a subtle way, but in a way that when you see it on a second viewing, that it all makes sense. So similarly, the Barker, who's playing Kevin Conway is playing 3 different roles in the movie. There is a bond. He singles her out. He knows there is something different about her.
Yeah.
There's something that's going to happen. Madame Zena singles her out, and because she's saying, "Are you psychic?" or "Do you have premonitions that often come true?" So it's all taken very seriously. And by the way, to me, one of the funniest scenes in the movie is the juxtaposition of that very intense scene where the kids are laughing in the background, and Richie grabs like his wallet, and he has to jam it in his mouth to stop from laughing.
Yeah.
Which
that
if
is
you
great.
which is what happens. Kids laugh inappropriately after they've gotten stoned, and they can't control themselves.
And who came up with the design for the monster?
This is really interesting because Rick Baker was first signed on to do it. Rick Baker designed it. I described the monster as being troll-like with glowing eyes. He had a movement that was very strange, like he could creep up on you very, very quickly. I only thought about it recently when I did an interview that what Tobe wanted to do, because we spoke about this, one-on-one, he wanted to figure out a way that the thing could be moving slow and fast at the same time. And we got Wayne Dober to do it. He does great. But I think the thing that Tobe wanted was in the action sequences, what they did in 28 Days Later, where they do that that crazy motion, where and that hadn't been invented yet. But he was described as being troll-like with white hair and like a split face that resembles, the split cow, which is in the movie, and that there was a fetus in a bottle that also had a split face, which so they dubbed Gunther the cowman. But that's what I wanted. I wanted him to be very troll-like, and I also wanted him to be, at the end of the movie, he's tracking Amy down by smell, which is, to me, is horrific. It's like an animal, more like an animal sniffing somebody out because he had sort of like imprinted on her. By the way, just very quickly, there was a huge chase scene that was supposed to take around 8 minutes after Buzz is killed, of Amy being stalked by the monster, Gunther. And he's following her as she's running. Now, he doesn't really want to kill her. We don't know this at this point. She's running for dear life. But she's already hallucinating because she just saw Buzz was killed. She runs. She just sees she sees Liz's body, and she's being stalked. And I wanted to, at that point, really like on acid, where just imagine the Funhouse, all those figures. Now you're on acid, where there's like starting to move and all this stuff. And I had her in the script at one point running headlong into one of the ceramic figures, and it falls over and cracks open, and there's the remains of a human being in that, which means that some of these figures that are in the Funhouse actually were plastered over human beings because they had done this before. He makes references to in Memphis, with those two. And again, there was an earlier scene.
That's quite early on, that reference, isn't it?
The which?
The reference to something happening to kids at a carnival.
They mention it very on in the beginning of the movie. The parents say, "We don't want you going because something happened when it went through the previous town." So you're all set up for it being a real cautionary tale. But I had an earlier scene where you actually see a body, which you think is a body. You think it's a mannequin being buried, and it's actually there's the remains of a person in this. So that when this was all over, if you went through that Funhouse, you were going to find a lot of bodies, which were basically used in this fashion. By the way, I also had it where he doesn't die at the end; he resurrects at the end of the movie. And the way I did it was, I mean, you can see it. It's obvious from the script. she stumbles out of the funhouse. Now people say, well, how'd she get out? Why didn't she get out earlier? Well, because the whole place disintegrates and falls apart when the chains go crazy at the end at the bottom. You see timbers like coming down, and that's how she's able to get out. But I had a scene inserted in between her getting out and wandering around, and you can see Marco the Magnificent and his daughter Carmela are actually there, and you can see the geek, who like grabs onto her clothing, and you can see God is watching you, lady. She's there too. I had an actual scene where then you go back into the funhouse, and all of a sudden you hear like a creaking, and a chain snaps, and it releases the monster, who, even though he had all these wounds on him, starts coming back to life. And then, because the chain started up again, you have the funhouse lady at the end laughing, and that's the reason why she starts laughing, and then it slows down because the chains are done. So
that would have been interesting to see. Yeah, that would be interesting.
I had him resurrected at the end of the movie because I wanted to do a freaking sequel.
Yeah, I think it would have really worked as well. I was just thinking about that kind of the ending scene with the monster. I was thinking it's a very classic. If you watch it, that'd be a great scene in black and white, because it feels like a very like early 20s kind of death to a monster. There's something very classic about those huge cogs, the monster, the kind of.
It's like like the movie Frankenstein. One of the Frankenstein movies that got the cog wheels in the windmill that powers the whole thing.
That's what I loved about that scene. Is it's like, it was just the way he was like pressed into it. You could see that was going to happen, but it was like, it was. And was she trying to save him or just get away from him when she's pulling away?
This is the whole thing that I think there's a part of her that that was feeling bad for him at this point, but it's just something. By the way, one of the things I remember Toby telling me is Elizabeth Barrett, when she was scared out of her, she was like genuinely petrified during this movie, and she's screaming. And Toby tells me this, right? Because I'm in the editing room with him. Okay, when they're editing at Universal Studios, I'm in the editing room with him. They left out all the brilliant editors. They left out the scene of when the parents come to pick up Joey. What's wrong, Joey? What's wrong, Joey? They left out the scene. It's in the movie now because I told the editor, "Would you please put it back in there?" It's where she says, "I'm going to get you, even with you so bad. You're never gonna forget it." And that's the reason why he ironically doesn't tell his parents that she's in there. That's the real reason for it. But I just lost my train of thought. That's a
really good scene in terms of the way that relationship between the sister and the brother. And they don't see each other again, do they? She obviously the kid sees the sister going in, but they don't.
He doesn't. What do you call it? He could tell his parents that Amy is in the thing. She's screaming, "Mommy!" She's screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" Not Mommy, because Mommy's a freaking alcoholic. Yeah. And the kid clams up. Now you don't know if the kid is clamming up because he's traumatized, but when you put in that sound, which they did, which I'm going to get even with you so bad that you're never going to forget what this is going to happen. That adds to his trauma. So he says nothing, and then they drive away. And they leave her on her own. But so I was going to say, so Amy throughout the entire movie, and Toby, we're in the editing room, we're doing this. He goes, "God bless her, she was amazing." But she's like saying, "Oh my God," through the entire last scene. She's going, "Oh my God, oh my God." And if you look very carefully, if you look at it like in Blu-ray, or you project it on a big screen. You can, a lot of times you can see that she's going, and they just got rid of it because it was too much. It became annoying. But I never forget Toby saying it. She's going, "Oh my," it gives me a falsetto voice. "Oh my God, oh my God." How many times can she say that? So but she was great. They were all such good sports.
You can see that you can see it when actors are believing the material, especially, I think, and I'm gonna highly recommend it, especially for our festival. I'm gonna highly recommend the film, and I think a mutual friend of ours on Instagram, he's gonna do a review for us. So I think it's fantastic, and it's very lean. There's no fat in it at all, I don't think, and yeah.
Wayne Double was absolutely brilliant. No, so you asked me, I'm sorry, about the mask, how it came about.
Yes.
So Rick Baker designed it. He designed it and came up with the cowman and the split face and all this. And then Craig Reardon actually executed it. And
Fantastic.
but you know, what's interesting is that I met Rick Baker, and then I saw him again at the screening, and was absolutely fantastic. He was great. The guy has been a genius for so many years. I can't tell you, and he continues to be.
Yeah, he's basically self-imposed retirement now after his experience on the Wolfman, I believe.
He talks about it, but I don't think real horror movie people ever really do this. There are stories of people who say, I've had enough, I want to retire. Doug Trumbo had enough of it after he did Brainstorm, and it broke his heart. The director, I mean, the special effects guy, Doug Trumbo,
genius.
Yeah, well, that was his first movie, and that broke him. He never wanted to direct another film again. I think he actually did wind up doing something, but I think anyway. So Craig Reardon actually, you know, if I bump into Craig Reardon, I was hoping to do this when they had Monsterpalooza here, which was canceled because of COVID. But he actually, in print, he said he didn't like the script, I would forgive him, obviously, but that's something that I was really very disappointed in that someone would say that.
It's a very specific thing, that as well. Like, I would say, I'm not a huge fan of the film. If you know what I mean, that's the kind of more polite way to go about it, I think.
Anyway, it was an amazing part of my life, and then there was the book that was like even a bigger miracle for me, the Dean Koontz book, which was the novelization by Dean Koontz. I made more money on my piece of the book than I did on the movie.
That is quite a stellar writer to have do that.
Well, it was early in Dean's career, and he was writing under the name of Owen West, and Universal Studios came forward and basically said, we're going to novelize this, because it was a little trendy to do that at that time.
Yeah.
And of course, me being the right, can I do? No, we already have someone. We got this guy named Owen West, and we're going to launch as the new Stephen King. We're giving him a 3-book deal, and no one knew that it was Dean Koontz. And they paid him a lot of money to do the novelization. He called me up. I spoke with him one time, and he said, Larry, this is Owen West. I've been tasked with doing a novelization of your script. I love your script. I'm going to do backstories and like really flesh it out and put a lot of backstory meat on it. Is there anything you want to tell me that that's not in the script? And my response was, no, the script kind of like speaks for itself. Good luck to you. And that was it. He came up with all these background stories and the mother being a little bit like in Carrie, and being, a devout holy roller Christian who was a screwball, and then the backstory of the Barker getting even with. If you know the book, it's all backstory, and Amy is there for a reason. It's fate. And the Barker is getting even with her because it's very complicated.
That's
brilliant.
Great. I'll have to read that. Yeah.
Oh no, you'll be amazed, because the last 20% of the book is the movie. The first 80% is all backstory.
That's great. I love that setup. That's great.
He did an extraordinary job, And then the book came out, and the book was delayed. That you can if you get the latest version of Dean Koontz's The Funhouse, the last 5 years ago they reissued it again. Afterward, he speaks all about me. We became like really best friends, because what happened is that when they first released the book, my deal was I had 3 points. There were 5 points to be divided up between the producers and myself, and I was very stubborn and basically demanded the three out of the 5 points. I got my 3 points, and the movie was delayed. The book came out earlier. It was supposed to come out simultaneously. Yeah. And the book went #2 on the New York Times bestseller list and sold like 2 million copies. So I had 3 points in that, which and in the book business, unlike the movie business, points in the movie business mean nothing. You'll never see profits unless they're off the gross. You'll never see profits because a movie has to make 3 times the amount of money that it made. So it was off the cover price. So I got a huge advance on the book. It was great. And then years later, like 10 years later, Dean announces himself as Owen West. It turns out is Dean Koontz, who had already was an established brand of being as big as Stephen King. Oh,
so then you had another huge peak.
They had to come to me and they had to say, okay, well, those points don't exist anymore because it's a republication. So we can give you maybe, a half a point or 1 point. And this was like, to me, is a miracle. But what is this difference between I'm supposed to get 3 and they're offering me a half or 1? So I call up Dean's agent, who I'd spoken to. I didn't even know the agent. Yeah. And said, listen, this is Larry Block. Could you just do me a favor and have Dean give me a call? I only spoke to him once when he was Owen West, and I didn't think he'd call me back. And he calls me back within like 2 hours, and he goes, let's go. Hey, Larry, how you doing? What's going on? And I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, you've become so famous. And I goes, well, Universal's republishing the book. He goes, yeah, that's right. I says, and well, they're telling me they can give me a half a point or 1 point. He goes, no. I'm not letting them do this to you. They are ripping you off so badly. You listen, the complete number of 3 points don't exist anymore, but you should be able to get 2.5 points. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. Here's what you're going to do. I'm giving you a half a point out of my pocket. I couldn't believe it. It was basically like handing me $30,000, $40,000.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. He says, you're going to go to Mace Neufeld, the producer, and you're going to tell Mace that, you know what, he's got to cough up a half a point. Because you just hang tough. I don't care how you do it, hang tough. And then you're going to have the hardest deal of all, which is with Universal Publishing, the Jove Books. They're going to threaten you. They're going to tell you they're not going to release the book, which is what they did. They said, we won't release the book. You're being too selfish. You're being too greedy. You don't deserve it. You didn't do anything. And but you're going to hang tough. And he goes, and get yourself a lawyer and just hang tough. And every time you feel weak, give me a call and I'll give you a pep talk to get you through this. So
that's incredible. That's incredible to be there as that pep talk as well.
I couldn't believe it. This guy was like a guardian angel sent by God. I'm being 100% serious.
Yeah.
And so as it played out, Universal, it's the book division. It's not the movie division. It's the book division.
Yeah.
Is threatening me and telling me you will never work in this town again. We're not giving you that half a point. The dean is telling me they will because otherwise they don't have a right to publish the book and it's already ready for publication. So just hang tough. I hang tough. They give me the 2.5 points. They're really pissed off at me. I think Universal is upset with me as well. And I get my first check. And I was broke at the time. I get my first check for the advance on Dean Koontz's. My name is not on the cover. It's under the copyright because they wanted to sell more books. And that's legitimate, that they would sell more books if it said,
that's understandable. Yeah.
And my first check was $119,000. And it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. And it was great. We became very close friends. I've worked on several projects with him. I set him up at one place with a deal at one of the Star Studio. I had rights to a whole bunch of his books over the years. The guy trusts me. He's like a brother to me, and I love the guy. We speak frequently. It's great having him as like as having Mr. And if you get the last republication of the Funhouse, which is probably 5 years ago, in the afterword, he talks very complimentary about me, about being his half Jewish brother in Los Angeles, because we have lots of religious debates, and it's very fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's like
That's great.
He's a very what I call a very high IQ Catholic. Like Graham Greene was a very high IQ Catholic, and I love reading Graham Greene.
Yeah, I've got a quad poster, which is the UK sized, which is 30 by 40 inches of the I think it was the 40th anniversary of The Third Man, and
oh wow,
I've got that somewhere. So I had that framed locally in Chester, where I'm from, in the northwest of the UK, and I had offers. I had 5 offers to buy the. It wasn't an original from 49. It was the reissue, but it's black and white with the kind of, I think it's yellow and red text with Graham Greene and Joseph Cotton and obviously Wells. And I had offers, and I said basically I want £2,000 for it. I knew I wouldn't get it, but there was offer of, I'm a huge poster collector. I used to buy them all the time. I've got a Carpenter originals. I've got a couple of Hitchcock bus stop posters from his last 2 films. I'm a massive poster collector, and Graham Greene, a brilliant writer, and I can imagine those debates you have with Dean Koontz is kind of part of the connection why he feels so close to you as well, and why you've become such good friends over the years.
Well, it's a very, I mean, in America right now, the religion thing is not very, I think we're one of the few last religious countries in the world, actually, believe it or not, where there's a lot of people, but it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And again, every horror movie, I will bet you that no horror movie exists that's any good that doesn't have at its foundation Judeo-Christian belief systems in taboos and morality and payback time, and what goes around comes around, and karma. These are all religious principles that play. That this is the engine that powers horror movies. It's the engine,
absolutely, yeah.
It's the engine that powers Hansel and Gretel and all the dark cautionary tales. It's the engine that runs mythology, Oedipus, all of literature.
Absolutely, the strongest material is kind of born out of all of that.
Because it's, by the way, it's all Jungian. It's baked.
Yeah,
even
Freud. It's in our DNA.
Absolutely. And when it works, when in a movie, when the audience is saying, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that," what's going to happen. Don't do it, and they do it. You know that this is why people become emotional.
Yeah,
I went to a screening went to a lot of screenings of Funhouse. It gets very depressing when the movie has had its run and it's finished. It was finished after around 3 or 4 weeks. I have a recording someplace. I put a digital record. I mean, it was a tape recorder and actually a little mini one of one of the recordings. But there's nothing like it in the world when you hear audiences verbalizing, "Don't do it," or "I can't watch."
It must be an amazing feeling as a writer to hear that.
It's a major adrenaline rush, and
when you're part of that as an audience member, it's great. But I can't imagine what it's like for a screenwriter.
The downside of this is that 1 out of every 100 screenplays actually gets made into a movie. Now maybe that's changing. Right. Maybe that's changing with streaming services, because I don't think they spend money anymore unless they're actually going to make something. But in terms of in terms of the studio system, I was at Paramount for 3 months. I had a nice office because I sold the project to Eddie Murphy, and they have vaults filled with thousands of screenplays that they paid good money for, and they never got made. And during the WGA strikes, we had two major big strikes that went on forever.
Oh yeah.
I think that's when Hollywood finally got smart and learned to stop buying all these spec screenplays up, because they stockpiled screenplays prior to each one of the strikes. They bought thousands of screenplays in anticipation of a strike, and then you're going to have a strike. You can't buy any more screenplays. And they got no value for their money whatsoever. So the ratio has always been around 1 out of 100.
Yeah.
So when you're fortunate enough to have a feature made, and it's a miracle to have this happen. I had it happen a couple of times, but there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it in the entire world. It is an unbelievable feeling. And the only downside of that is that when you're selling scripts and they're paying you good option money, and then the movies are not getting made, the majority of writers in the Writers Guild don't have features that are made. You can make a very comfortable living selling screenplays that just sit and go through development deals forever, and then they bring other writers on. You still got paid that money for the option.
I read a story. It was in the Guerrilla, I think it was the Guerrilla Filmmakers Handbook years ago, and it was about Quick and the Dead, the screenwriter that sold that. I think it was the Sam Raimi film with Russell Crowe. There's a magnificent cast in it. I'm not a big fan of the film, but the screenplay was sold for, it was a spec script, and it was like $2 million or something.
Yeah,
like
well,
that. It was crazy. It was crazy, absolutely crazy.
They were doing this, and again, this was a thing where they would announce the numbers, and everybody would be so excited. But then you realize these movies are not being made. Some movies, I mean, if you look at the history of them, they're 10 years in the making. They're 12 years in the making. And then there's some book. There's a great book about the great movies that were never made, and it lists a whole bunch of them. And yet some of them actually, since that book was published, actually did get made. But it's fascinating, and it's the one downside of being a screenwriter, as opposed to being like a novelist or a short story writer or a poet even, because what you learn there when you're a novelist, you can show your novel to people, and they can read it. You write a short story. You want to read my short story? People, oh, that's great. I love it. Because everybody can read novels and short stories and poems. But screenplays are a very different kind of a format. It's not even like a play. And
you know, it was a relatively clever move, but when J.K. Rowling released the screenplay or the play for Cursed Child, I think it was the sequel to the Harry Potter series. I think it's a sequel. It was for the stage play that was massively successful. And that's probably the most read screenplay, because that's what it is. They've just put it into a book and they released that. So it's a real insight into it. Obviously, so many people have never read a screenplay before in the formatting. But that was quite an interesting move, obviously, by
Jordan Peele did this with Get Out. It
makes complete sense. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah,
and I think I might have mentioned to you, one of my dreams is, and now that I own the rights to the Funhouse, not through the Writers Guild, but because you do to a certain extent anyway, but because through copyright, it was a 3-year process. I own the rights to the Funhouse.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about as well. Is that and before we continue on that, I'd like to, if we stick with the Funhouse, I'd like to chat again about some of the other projects of the work. I think that'll be really good to do 2 or 3 episodes. I think that'll be great fun. So yeah, how did you get the rights back, and what was the reasoning behind that?
Okay, so there's a copyright rule which talks about recapture that I think it went to federal court, where it was pretty damn obvious that when 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when people were giving up their copyright in the arts, meaning novels, screenplays, songs, that nobody understood what the value was going to be in the future markets, where they would have streaming services and they would have MP3s of music. Ray Charles' family, his estate, never had any concept that this would go on forever and that they would do remasterings.
Yeah.
So, and same with movies. So they did a thing that was called copyright recapture, and where if you put an organization on notice, the people who own your copyright, that you want it back, they have 3 years to contest it or make a deal with you to make them have it in perpetuity.
How long do you have to wait before you can start that 3-year process?
I believe it. The magic number for me was like 79, 80, and 81. So there's a famous attorney, Mark Toberoff, who specializes in this.
Yeah, he's waiting for things to tick. Yeah.
Yeah, he got back for Ray Charles's family. He got I believe it was Ray Charles. He got back the music rights for his estate.
Wow.
He got back the novel rights for the Alex Haley estate, which is why you saw a remake that was done for cable of Roots. He recaptured the rights on Piranha, which was originally a Roger Corman $500,000 movie. I believe it was an Asian woman who owned the rights. He got the rights back for her. They turned it into a $20 million 3D movie, which had Richard Dreyfuss in the introduction.
Great cameo, yeah.
No, and it had Elizabeth Shue was in it. It had a real cast. Listen, it's a piece of exploitation, but it's a great film.
It's a proper movie, yeah.
Yeah, it's a legitimate movie, and it did very well. It did really well.
The reason I watched it was because I saw, Richard Dreyfuss has coming in. I've got to watch this now.
Well, they were very smart. He also co-produced the movie because he set the deal up. Anyway, he approached me, and because he was going through like a whole catalog of 79, 80, 81 horror movies, which were ripe for this, for this copyright recapture.
So did he approach you, or did you kind of mutually find each other?
No. He approached me. He called me up and said, "Is this Larry Block who wrote The Funhouse? I've been trying to find you." I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, I have an interesting, proposition for you if you're interested in doing recapture." And the negotiations took a very long time because he wanted, what most attorneys want when they're going to work, basically on an if-come basis. But I worked out a super deal with him, and he was a real gentleman because he likes to produce these movies as well. And so he gets 40%.
That's a great way obviously for him. That's a great way to become a producer, I guess, is to.
Well, he's done it, and he's a producer on all those movies and recaptures. And so I made a deal with him, and my personal attorney said he couldn't believe I made this deal. So he can get 40% of my literary rights, but I get 40% of his producing rights because he gets much bigger producing rights than I ever get. So it's almost like we're 50-50 partners in this venture.
I see, yeah. So
and
you both want to see it. So what do you want to happen next?
I don't know. I'm kind of like, so the first thing I really want to do, which has got nothing to do with a movie, is I want to do a coffee table book the way Jordan Peele did it, but I want to go to Universal Studios, get the rights to be able to do a collaboration of the shooting script, the original screenplay, the second original screenplay that was done for Universal, and put it all together in this huge, magnificent book with the history of the movie The Funhouse. And I just think
would Universal or who would have them production design the original boards for it? Would you have the boards for it? Because it's obviously a very well shot film.
They have everything. Everything you could want to imagine. I'm assuming that they actually have those titles still.
Yeah.
They have the blood dripping.
That would be a great section for the book, and talking about the production of the titles and everything. There's so much to it.
No, I would love to do this. By the way, I'm convinced to this day, because I was accessible. I'm a lifetime member of the Writers Guild. Anybody could have gotten in touch with me at any time just through the Writers Guild. I'm convinced that the reason why I was left off the Blu-ray and the DVD was because they were upset with me.
Sorry to cut you off, but left off what, being interviewed?
I wasn't interviewed on the DVD or the Blu-ray.
Yeah,
I know more about the Funhouse. You know, my memory was better than Tobe's.
What do you think the reasoning? What do you think the reasoning of that is?
I think the reasoning is I think the producers and everybody involved in it was very upset that I wound up with a very large percentage of the money from the book, from the Dean Koontz book. Over the years, I wound up with probably $250,000 from the Dean Koontz book, and they got very little. And I think they're very upset about it, and they were very upset about it. But now that I have the rights to it, you can't reissue the Blu-ray without going to me.
Yeah.
So, and I want to see it come out in 4K. So anyway, I want to do a coffee table book. I want to do a sequel.
Would you be up for a remake?
Well, I really would like to do a remake because there were a lot of scenes that were left out, and I think that the concept of it would have to be a period piece, because and there's a precedent for this. I mean, it could go on afterwards in present time, but there were a lot of things that were left out, and again, I'm most disappointed in the fact that chase scene. Verna Fields came in, the editor, and we didn't have a chase scene. So it gives you the illusion of a chase scene. If you saw the movie, where she's like running and all the mannequins are like popping up and the lights are flashing and you see the gorilla going like swiping like this, and they gave the illusion of a chase scene, but it's not a real chase scene where she's really running more than 25 feet to get to the room where Liz's body is before she falls down. Yep. I had a chase. The Funhouse had this incredible. I have the blueprints, by the way, to the Funhouse.
They could be. I have the original. That's amazing. They could have utilized that whole. Obviously, there's something appealing of the monster in the castle, so to speak, but then you could have used the entire fair. The whole. So what was the original plan? Can you remind me what was the original plan for that chase?
Okay, what I had originally wanted to do was Buzz is killed. I was very surprised that Buzz comes out on the statue, which I had. I was very surprised that there wasn't more blood. It's just like a pool of blood, showing through his shirt. I was very surprised that it didn't look a lot worse.
Yeah,
I think they did it because he was a pretty sympathetic character at the end, because he was a hero at the end, and I don't think they wanted to show it really bad. But was very surprised that they didn't show it at all. So she sees this, she totally freaks out. They do that great shot with the chandelier. It's just beautiful, where the camera cranes down, and then she starts running.
Yeah.
And then she was supposed to be running and being stalked. He's supposed to be following her above, the same. There's like
the raft, so to speak. Yeah.
There's a catwalk up there with trap. We know there's trap doors because Liz falls through a trap door. We know there's a structure up there because a noose comes down and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very Phantom of the Opera. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Which remind me, I also have delusional ideas about doing this as a Broadway show, which is Phantom of the Opera meets the Elephant Man. Okay, meets Sweeney Todd. It makes
sense. It makes complete sense. Yeah.
When you change the whole theater becomes a carnival. Where they're selling stuff and popcorn, and you're getting cotton candy, and you're watching this incredible show, which is an incredible.
Yeah,
love.
It'd be quite
love
immersive.
Story.
Yeah. So was the chase going to continue in the rafters?
The chase was going to be, she's running through the main floors of the Funhouse, up the ramp, because remember there's a ramp that goes up and there's a ramp that goes down. You run through the gorilla's mouth. There was a beautiful, amazing set.
That set was great, yeah.
this was Mort Rabinowitz, who did Castle Keep and They Shoot Horses, Don't They, which were all one giant set. The guy was a genius, and everything from scratch.
It's so efficient. It's really well shot, and those crane moves. It was very cleverly, efficiently shot, that film. Yeah.
And in a very short period of time. Anyway, I had her being stalked. Yeah. Like a regular movie where you're being stalked through the woods, otherwise, but you're being stalked through the funhouse.
Yeah.
And she's running in and out, and then while this is going on, she actually runs head on into one of the mannequins.
Oh, you mentioned that before, yeah. And there's a body,
cracks open. Because we're surreal at this time. It's like she's on acid, and I would have it actually like crack apart, like in stop motion almost, where she would see this, and then she takes off again, and the thing is getting closer and closer, and he's sniffing her out, and it's absolutely horrific until she winds up in the room where Liz is.
Yeah.
And then at that point she backs into the she recoils when he breaks through the door, and what do you call it? There's a dresser drawer that breaks open, and then you see that there's a way to get down to the bowels of the funhouse, and then she's in where the equipment room is.
If that had been included, you'd say, oh yeah, it's more of a Tobe Hooper film now. You know what I mean?
Well, you know what it was supposed to look like? Because I was a big fan. It was supposed to look like the end scene in Suspiria, where she's running for her life through this like maze to get out, and things are exploding all around. I love that scene. I love that movie, by the way.
Great movie, yeah.
What a beautiful looking movie. Speaking about colors. Anyway, it was supposed to go on forever, and they did a great job of giving you the illusion of that chase.
Yeah.
But they didn't have that, and they didn't have the thing which would have taken it to a whole other level of, you realize that half of these mannequins have people under them. This becomes so much more insidious.
Exactly, yeah. That would have been a great reveal as well.
So I would do that. So I would like to do that. I mean, you could do this as a self-contained, very long first act, which takes place then.
Yeah.
Okay. And then jump 10, 20 years, later. And I mean, there were so many possibilities. And then, of course, there was a possibility of doing a sequel just instead, or then there was doing it as a series, which would be so much fun.
Is the Blu-ray released by Arrow or Shout or one of those?
I believe it's Shout.
It's like Screen Factory maybe or something like that.
Yeah.
One of those, yeah.
Yeah, and it's gorgeous. I contacted them and I said I would love to do when you guys are ready to do the 4K. I'm the guy who wrote. I know more information about this movie than anyone. I mean, I've seen all.
You need to put commentary on it. You've got to do a commentary for it.
Well, this is what I wanted to do, and their response was, "We love this. We would love to do it, but we no longer have the rights to they no longer have the rights to do the to reissue the Blu-ray. They would have to purchase them again." Which again, I was very anxious about getting it done very quickly, but I'm not so anxious anymore. It's a real property. It's
something to be very proud of, and I understand. But as we spoke briefly yesterday to set this up, it's something that if it's done, you want it done right, and you want to be involved. And I can totally understand that.
Oh no, and and what happens in Hollywood is you just get this thing about, you're sure that you want to really be the one that writes it or works on the story for it, and that's the insanity of Hollywood. I learned a very valuable lesson from Dean Koontz. He told me a story. He was at one of the major studios. I'm not going to name the studio. They invited him in for a meeting. They were going to make a whole bunch of movies, Dean Koontz movies, and they brought him in and they had a development meeting. And he tells me, so we're in the meeting, and we're talking about the book and how I would do the adaptation, because he's a screenwriter. He got credits. I mean, his first movie that was made was basically Julie Christie and the robot falls in love with her in the smart house. You have to know this movie. She's raped, but she's raped by the smart house in this movie. It's a very famous movie. You can look it up.
It's not Barbara Hershey.
No. That's the one with the ghost rape.
Oh my God, that's got. I'm going to say this line. That Barbara, I can't remember the title of the film. It's "Welcome Home, Cunt" on the end. It's the last line of the movie. It's one of the most horrific things I've heard in a film. Like it's just so dark, you know.
Anyway, so he's in a meeting and he's talking about the adaptation, and one of the development executives is there, and the president of the studio is there, and Dean says, "Well, I would do this," and then one of the development executives says, "Well, no. This is totally wrong. This is wrong. You know, what you really need to do is you need to do this." Now, they're talking to Dean Koontz. He had written 20 horror books at that time that were all best-selling books. And do me a favor, don't have the audacity to basically say you're doing it wrong. What are you like, kidding me? What happens in Hollywood is after you're 40 years old, they really don't want to hear anything that comes out of your mouth. And it's very, very sad because in the world of novels, good novelists write up until their 80s, and 80 years old, they're still writing great novels.
I'm for the Hellbound Horror Festival, which we're going to kind of launch this interview on. We're one of our judges, Ramsey Campbell. He's been writing for 60 years, 59 and a half years, something like that. He writes every single day, and he gets up at 6 a.m. And to dismiss someone because of age, it's completely ludicrous. If the content's there, the writing's there, and the ideas are there, then have at it.
I just think I find it very. Anyway, this is my baby, and again, there's a lot of stuff that's in the. There are several drafts of the screenplay, including the original one, which got. Which, by the way, I got it directed at Tobe Hooper myself. Let me just, if you have time, just very quickly. Here's the real story. And I've seen interviews that Tobe gave in his last years where he has absolutely forgotten the real story. He knew the real story at one time because he was there, he was part of it. But the real story is there was a company called Levy Gardner Lavin Productions who had done a lot of TV, Big Valley series that ran a really long time. The Rifleman, they had done one horror movie called It Challenges the World, which was a black and white horror movie, which if you're a real fan of 50s horror movies, you would know it. It's called The Creature or the Monster That Challenged the World. Anyway, I was pitching I came in for a pitch meeting to meet with Arthur Gardner, who was a supporter of me and a friend of mine. And I'm waiting in the waiting room to go in, and Arthur comes out with one of his partners, Jules Levy, and says, "Oh, hi, Larry. Just give us a minute. This is Tobe Hooper. We just met with him. Why don't you guys chat for a minute and say hello, and then we're going to make some notes, and then we'll call you in for the meeting." So I had like around 10, 15 minutes with Tobe, and he's charming, Texas accent. So how you all doing there? What you up to? What are you working on? And I tell him I've got this project called the Funhouse, and I'm what's it about? Well, it's about this traveling carnival that comes to town, and there are these kids, and they're not supposed to go. And he goes, "It sounds fantastic. I love traveling carnivals. When do you think you're going to have it done?" And I said, "I have a couple of more weeks of work on it, and then it'll be done." It took me a long time to come up with the idea of doing it. I wanted to do a haunted house story, and then I realized through the development process that the best haunted house in the world would actually be the creepiest one would be a traveling carnival, which is really a haunted house on wheels that travels from town to town and can get away with things. So he says, "Well, I'd love to see it. Here's my number," and he scribbles his number down. He gives it to me, and he says, "When you're done, please give me a call, and I would love to see it." So then we say goodbye, and then I go and I do my meeting, and I'm pitching my story to them. And then afterwards, I'm like real excited because I just met Tobe Hooper, and I knew about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all this stuff. So I start doing my research, and I watch it a couple of times because I hadn't really actually spent any time on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I realized what his sensibilities were, and I immediately make some adjustments. And I'm thinking to myself, directors say this all the time, but they never really, it never really amounts to anything because it's a big crapshoot. I had been out here like almost a year. I had a couple of development deals, but for low amount of monies, where they'll commission you to do a story. And I finished the script, and I called Tobe up, and he answers the phone. Hey, how you doing? Do you remember me? Yeah. Well, the script is finished. He says, can you get it to me? So I messenger it over to him, and I'm thinking it's going to take a while to hear from him. And a couple of days later, he calls me up and says, Larry, I really like this. I want to try to figure something out. So I have a friend, who I'm going to try to get the money from, and I want to option this for myself. So he had called up Mark Lester, who he knew, and Mark Lester, who would go on to be a director himself. He eventually directed Firestarter and a lot of other like lower budget movies than that. Yeah. And he got Mark Lester to come up with $1,000, and then Mark Lester, Tobe Hooper went to me and basically says, okay, here's $1,000. We'll do a little letter of agreement. We're optioning it for a year. And then Mark Lester got to know Derek Power somehow. And Derek Power, I told you, was a producer who had done, the only thing he had really done that I know of was Peter Weir's The Last Wave. And he started working for Mace Neufeld. All like very kismet, it's like somebody up there really likes me because he started working for Mace Neufeld, who was partners with Harvey Bernhard, and the two of them, B&H Productions or B&B Productions, had done The Omen. They produced The Omen, all the Omens, and so Derek now became a development executive and a partner with Mace Neufeld, and he brought him the project, which he had optioned through Mark Lester, and then Mace Neufeld got involved and said, "I like this. Maybe we can set this up as a real feature," because it was originally going to be very low budget, and he got it to Universal Studios to Tom Mount. Tom Mount originally said, I love this, we're going to do this. And then a couple of weeks go by, and I'm all excited and all fired up. I'm telling my whole family that we got a movie deal, we got a movie deal at Universal Studios. And then Tom Mount says, you know what, changed my mind. We're not going to do this. They were trying to cash in on Halloween, and I think Friday the 13th was already coming out. And we're not doing this. And of course, I wanted to shoot myself because I told everybody that we're doing it. And Mace convinced Tom Mount to change his mind, and they decided they would do it as a negative pickup for like around $3.5–4 million as a negative pickup, and then we did it. So that's the true story. I mean, it was a spec screenplay that was optioned by Mark Lester for Tobe Hooper, and eventually it wound up at Universal because of who they were involved with. But it was a spec screenplay; it always was. Which is why it was based on my original screenplay that was spec, not a work for hire. Had that been a work for hire, I wouldn't have had any cards in terms of the points.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking
absolutely.
about this now in the book, because even if I want to do a remake, I'm entitled now to do a novelization of my own screenplay, and if I were to bring Dean Koontz into it, and I could, he did it as a work for hire, so he really, other than just giving me his blessing, he doesn't own the copyright. It's really Universal Studios and myself, and now it's only me because Universal gave up their copyright, literary rights. Wow. So that's the true story about how this came about. And I've seen interviews that make me kind of crazy when it was like, we both came up with the idea together. It's nonsense.
It's incredibly frustrating, that.
Well, yeah, but I've been telling the story a lot lately, so it feels It
I
feels
can
good.
understand why, because it's, you know, it's your baby in the end, isn't it?
It was such a it was so enlightening for me because I was pretty young. I didn't have kids yet. We were struggling. We had been out here for around a year. And as I said, I wanted to do some kind of a haunted house. I had seen the movie Halloween, and I liked it very much, but I was convinced that the supernatural element was added as an afterthought because it's really, it's a variation on Psycho. The beginning of that movie is it's a kid. It's a kid who winds up to be a killer who murders his sister, you know, and there was nothing supernatural about that. He was locked up in an insane asylum. And then by the time you get to the end of the movie, it becomes supernatural. He's popping up in places in a way. And then when you get to the very end, when he's shot at and he goes flying through the window and he winds up, you know, the body winds up, it's a bunch of twigs. I believe at that, I mean, I was very naive at the time, obviously, but I believe at that time they said, well, wow, let's give it a supernatural ending and we'll be able to, you know, spin off a whole new series on this indestructible supernatural creature. That was in my mind. I mean, I never confirmed it, but I'm pretty sure if you look at the movie carefully, it's not there. So I thought I could do better, and I wanted to do some kind of a haunted house movie. I was playing around with ideas. And then I remembered when I was 16 or 17 going to the carnival and being so turned on by it and so rich with colors and atmosphere and craziness and legitimate danger. I had a line in there that they took out where one of the barkers, I mean, one of the carnies are really grifters. They're very dangerous people. As a matter of fact, in the last year, there was some murder that happened. I forget what part of in the United States it happened in, but they traced it back to a carny worker. So it's like they're still carny workers and they're still doing this. But I wanted to get into that nightmare. There was a scene in the movie where one of the carny workers actually says, how come every time when there's an accident on one of the rides and people are killed, the lines double? Okay, the lines double when they reopen it. And then I had the other guy saying offhand to the guy saying about, ain't you ever read Sigmund Freud?
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Anyway, but it was the whole idea of the danger. People think carnivals are very safe places because it's regulated by the government. They have inspectors that come around. There are accidents that happen all the time in traveling carnivals. There are accidents that happen all the time. So it's the whole atmosphere is fraught. And, you know, it goes back to the movie Freaks, which is a great film, by the way.
Oh, it's classic.
Anyway, it deals with this whole thing about reality, non-reality, geeks. Are they real? Are they not real? Is it pretend? Is it, you know, is it supernatural? Is it this? And, you know, it's for me, it's kind of like it was the ultimate horror movie that one could tell.
Absolutely. Well, Larry, I'm going to wrap it up there. What we'll do is I'll just stop this recording and then I'll do a little wrap up and then we'll just chat about our next. We should definitely do another recording about a lot of other stuff we spoke about yesterday. So, Larry Block, thank you very much.
My absolute pleasure. I wish you good luck in everything you're doing. It sounds so exciting and so energizing. And because I will tell you, horror fans are the greatest people in the world. When they're legitimate horror fans, you can tell because they are willing. They so want to have that jump scare. They so want to have that release of energy that they are also extraordinarily forgiving. When there's something that doesn't work right in a movie, they don't care. They really don't care. They just love the genre. I think it's in their DNA. I think when these kids were growing up, their parents used to like spook them. And so that they have like this combination of fear and love built into them when it comes to horror movies. And it's an amazing escape valve for.
Absolutely. That's the reason I started this festival. And where's the best place that people can find you?
Well, I'm in my old age. I'm like all over the place. I'm on IMDb. as Lawrence J. Block, the Funhouse. There are two other Lawrence Blocks. One is the mystery writer who I finally got him to, he's great, he's a genius, but I got him to on his website, he says, if you're interested in Larry Block, the screenwriter, go to this IMDb.
I've got a funny story about a mix-up like that. Sorry, yeah, I'll tell you about that when we stop. But yeah,
I'm on Instagram big time, a little bit too big time, under @LarryBlock Screenwriter. And I know that sounds like a pompous thing to say, but I had to do that because of the Larry Block, the mystery writer, and the Larry Block, the actor, who is passed away. But people keep mixing these things up, so it had to be @Larry Block Screenwriter. And I'm on YouTube, which I'm really trying to build up now. And that's under Lars Block. But if you really want to get to it right away, you just do, you can do Larry Block, the Funhouse, or Larry Block, Tobe Hooper, or Larry Block, the Me Gunther Horror Show, which is like my big passion project that I'm doing right now. And it should come up right away. So,
well, thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.
Okay, my pleasure. And again, I hope this does great for you. I'm gonna push it. But I hope your festival goes way beyond your wildest dreams and just grows and grows and grows, and then becomes like mega.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Larry. So
and then don't turn shitty when it does, please.
No. I know. I'd rather keep it than well, depending on how much is involved.
It's like Comic-Con then,
yeah,
and Comic-Con now. You know, I'm talking about it
well, the last thing I'll say before we finish is that the sense of community is the biggest thing, and connecting with people like yourself on Instagram and many other our filmmakers. And we've had filmmakers from Turkey, Australia, South America, United States. It's kind of growing on its own. And it's fascinating with the judges we've got involved. We've got an Oscar-nominated BAFTA award winner now as a judge. So it's crazy. And that came about based on, you know who I'm talking about, we mentioned yesterday. It's not officially announced yet. His daughter's a big horror fan, so that worked out a treat. So yeah, they're going to watch the films together. So Larry Block, thank you very much. I'll see you soon.
My absolute pleasure.